When most people picture pirates, they imagine sun-bronzed rogues sailing through crystal-clear Caribbean waters completely. Their weathered faces tanned by tropical heat as they hunt for buried treasure on palm-fringed islands.
Hollywood has painted this image so vividly that we forget crucial truth about Golden Age.
Of piracy, many of most successful pirate crews spent months battling through bone-chilling waters of North Atlantic, where greatest enemy wasn't enemy cannons or rival crews. It was cold that could kill man faster than any sword ever forged. Picture this nightmare scenario. You're standing on slippery wooden deck in middle of Atlantic Ocean. Icy rain is driving sideways into your face. Like frozen needles, waves as tall as buildings are crashing over ship and soaking you
to bone. And wind is so cold it feels like it's stripping warmth from body.
With every breath, your clothes are frozen stiff against your skin, your fingers are so numb you can barely grip rigging, and you know that if you fall overboard into
those black waters, you'll be dead in minutes, not from drowning, but from hypothermia that will shut down your body before you can even call for help. This was reality for pirates who sailed northern routes between Europe and America, where fire wasn't always possible on storm-battered decks, and staying warm meant a difference between waking up next morning or becoming another ghost. Starry whispered in taverns. These weren't just battles against human enemies. They were wars against nature itself, where survival required techniques so desperate and disgusting that they would make modern survivalists cringe with admiration and horror. Hypothermia killed more pirates than all naval battles and sword fights
combined, stalking through ships like invisible assassin that could claim victims without warning and leave.
No obvious wounds to mark its passing. Human body loses heat 25 times faster in cold water than in cold air, which meant that pirates who got soaked during storms were essentially racing against time to warm up before their core temperature dropped below point of no return. Early symptoms were deceptively mild: shivering, numbness in fingers and toes, and slightly confused thinking. But pirates learned to recognize these signs as death's calling card, because once hypothermia progressed beyond initial stages, victims would stop shivering, become dangerously disoriented, and eventually fall into sleep from which they would never wake up. Cruel irony was that hypothermia often struck hardest during times when
pirates most needed to be alert and capable, like during storms when every crew member had
to work frantically to keep ship afloat and on course. Pirates couldn't simply retreat below deck. When weather turned deadly, someone had to handle sails, man pumps, steer ship, and perform dozens of other crucial tasks that kept everyone alive, which meant working half-naked in freezing winds. While waves crashed over deck and soaked them in water that was sometimes barely above freezing. Exhaustion made hypothermia worse, since tired bodies couldn't generate heat as effectively, and poor nutrition meant that many pirates were already weakened before they faced their battles against cold. Combination of physical demands, terrible weather, and inadequate protection created conditions where even strong, experienced sailors could succumb to hypothermia in matter of hours, turning routine voyage segments into survival ordeals that tested every technique and trick crews had learned. Pirates became masters of improvised insulation, creating warming systems from whatever materials they could steal, scavenge, or repurpose from their ships and captured cargo completely. They learned that layering was more effective than single thick garments, so they would wear multiple. Stolen shirts, stolen coats, stolen cloaks, anything they could find that would trap warm air close to their skin. Some pirates stuffed their clothes with whatever organic material was available. Dried moss, gathered from islands, straw taken from captured livestock ships, even scraps of sailcloth torn into strips, and used as primitive insulation. Most resourceful crews would raid captured vessels for woolen goods, fur-lined coats, or thick blankets that could be cut up and sewn into crude but effective cold weather.
Gear. Pirates weren't particular about fashion or cleanliness when their lives depended on staying warm, so
they would layer stolen women's dresses over their regular clothes if that's what was available, or
like walking piles of mismatched fabric, waddling around their ships in layers so thick they could
barely move their arms, but these ridiculous outfits saved lives during brutal Atlantic crossings. Downside of this
multi-layered approach was that warm, dark spaces between clothing layers became perfect breeding grounds for lice, fleas, and other parasites that thrived in unwashed fabric, leading to constant itching and scratching that became routine parts of cold weather sailing. Pirates developed dark sense of humor about their uninvited passengers, joking that bugs provided extra warmth and claiming that good infestation was proof that man's clothing system was working properly. When weather conditions made open fires impossible on deck, ingenious pirate crews learned to create hidden warming stations below deck using techniques that were equal parts brilliant and potentially suicidal. They would fill iron barrels with sand, then build small fires on top of sand, creating contained heating systems that could warm groups of men without setting entire wooden ship ablaze. Clay pots and metal braziers served similar purposes, allowing crews to burn whatever fuel they could find. Scraps of wood, pieces of canvas soaked in oil, even dried animal waste when nothing else was available, while keeping flames contained in fireproof containers. These below-deck fires were incredibly dangerous since one mistake could turn warming fire into ship-destroying inferno, and they filled cramped quarters with thick, choking smoke that made breathing difficult and eyes stream with tears. But pirates learned to manage these risks because alternative was freezing to death, and they developed elaborate protocols for fire safety. That included assigning specific crew members to watch flames constantly and maintain buckets of water or sand for emergencies. Smoke problem was partially solved by creating crude ventilation systems using canvas tubes
or wooden pipes that could direct some of fumes toward hatches or other openings, though these
systems were imperfect and everyone below deck still had to endure significant smoke exposure. Warming fires became social centers where pirates would gather in shifts, taking turns getting close enough to flames to restore feeling to numb fingers and toes, and these sessions often resembled desperate huddle formations where men competed for warmest spots like penguins clustering together on Antarctic ice. Some crews developed rotation systems to ensure fair access to warming fires, but arguments and even fights sometimes broke out.
When men were too cold to think rationally and became aggressive about protecting their access to life-saving heat, pirates discovered that alcohol could be a double-edged weapon in their war against hypothermia,
providing temporary relief from cold but also creating dangerous illusions that could lead to fatal mistakes. In judgment, rum, brandy, and whatever other spirits they could steal or trade for became essential supplies for cold weather voyages, not just because they provided liquid courage before battles, but because they seemed to generate warmth from inside when consumed in carefully measured amounts. Burning sensation that came in.
From drinking strong alcohol felt like heat spreading through body. And many pirates swore that few
Gulps of rum could restore warmth to frozen limbs and help them function during worst weather.
Conditions. But experienced pirates also learned that alcohol was a treacherous ally that could betray them when you...
They needed it most. Too much drinking actually made hypothermia worse by causing blood vessels to dilate
and allowing body heat to escape more rapidly, leaving men feeling warm while their core temperature
dropped dangerously low. Pirates who got drunk during cold weather sometimes made fatal errors in judgment.
like taking off layers of clothing because they felt overheated, or falling asleep on the deck where they would freeze to death before morning. Most skilled cold-weather pirates learned to use alcohol strategically, taking small sips to maintain morale and provide temporary warmth, while avoiding larger quantities that could impair their survival instincts. Some crews developed elaborate drinking protocols for cold weather, with experienced sailors, monitoring their shipmates' alcohol consumption and intervening when men seemed to be drinking themselves into hypothermic stupors rather than using liquor as survival tool. Practice of communal sleeping became crucial survival technique that saved countless pirate lives during brutal Atlantic crossings, even though it violated every notion of personal space and individual dignity that these tough, independent men normally cherished. Pirates learned that heat could be shared and multiplied when groups of men slept together in tight clusters, wrapping themselves in whatever blankets, sails, or tarps they could find, and creating human heating systems that were far more effective than individual sleeping arrangements. Hammocks that normally held single sleepers were rigged to accommodate 2 or even 3 men, creating cramped but warm sleeping conditions where shared body and heat could keep everyone alive through coldest nights. Some crews would designate specific areas below deck as communal warming zones where off-duty pirates could huddle together under piles of stolen blankets, spare and sails, or even animal skins taken from captured cargo. These group sleeping arrangements required men to overcome their natural reluctance to get physically close to their unwashed, lice-infested shipmates, but survival instincts eventually overcame social inhibitions when alternative was freezing to death alone. Pirates developed elaborate systems for
rotating positions within sleeping clusters, ensuring that everyone got time in warmest center spots, rather than
being stuck on cold edges all night, and they learned to sleep through discomfort of being
pressed against other men who might be snoring, scratching, or moving around during night. Most successful
communal sleeping arrangements often resembled giant human nests, where 6 or 8 pirates would pile together
under whatever covering they could find, creating warm microclimates that could sustain life even when the ships...
At least we do not need a fridge. You got that right.
About cuddling with enemy, or claiming that they were getting practice for sharing beds with captured
treasures. But everyone understood that these jokes were covering up reality, that they were literally keeping each other alive through shared warmth. When conventional warming methods weren't enough, most desperate pirates resorted to techniques that were so disgusting and primitive, they seemed to belong more in Stone Age. Survival manuals than on sailing ships, but these methods often worked when everything else failed.
They learned that animal fat, whale oil, or any other greasy substance could be smeared on exposed
skin to create protective barrier against wind and water, essentially turning their bodies into waterproof surfaces
that retained heat more effectively. This technique was borrowed from Arctic peoples, who had used similar methods for centuries, but pirates had to improvise with whatever fats they could find, sometimes using cooking.
Grease, sometimes using oil from captured lamp fuel, and sometimes even using rendered fat from rats.
Or other ship animals. Process was revolting, leaving pirates covered in slippery, smelly substances that attracted
dirt and made it difficult to grip ropes or weapons. But insulation effect was real, and dirt
could make difference between surviving cold snap and succumbing to hypothermia. Pirates who used this technique
And often looked like they had been dipped in oil, and they would slide around the ship's deck.
like human ice cubes, creating both practical problems and unintentional comic relief during serious survival situations. Some crews developed techniques for applying grease strategically to areas most vulnerable to heat loss: faces, hands,
necks, and any exposed skin, while avoiding areas where slipperiness would create dangerous safety hazards. Smell was
horrible, texture was disgusting, and social consequences were embarrassing. But pirates who mastered grease technique often survived cold weather voyages that killed their cleaner, more dignified shipmates who were too proud or squeamish
to embrace such primitive survival methods. Despite all their creative techniques and desperate innovations, many pirate and
crews still lost men to hypothermia during worst Atlantic crossings, and pirate folklore is filled with grim tales of frozen corpses and crew members who simply vanished into icy darkness of northern seas. Ship's logs and survivor accounts tell stories of men whose fingers became so frozen that
they snapped off when they tried to grip rigging, leaving bloody stumps that had to be
cauterized with hot iron to prevent infection. Other tales describe pirates who turned blue during the night watches and were found next morning, frozen solid at their posts, still standing upright, but no longer breathing, like maritime statues carved from ice and desperation. Some crews experienced mass hypothermia events during particularly brutal storms, losing 5 or 6 men in single night when temperatures dropped unexpectedly, and ships' warming systems couldn't keep up with sudden cold snap. Pirates learned to recognize warning signs of severe hypothermia in their shipmates, the strange euphoria that preceded unconsciousness, confused speech patterns that indicated dangerous core temperature drops, and deadly sleepiness that meant someone was minutes away from them freezing to death. These experiences taught surviving pirates valuable lessons about cold weather survival, but they also created grim awareness that even most experienced crews could be overwhelmed by weather conditions that were simply too extreme for human survival without proper equipment and shelter. Some of most successful pirate and
captains became legendary for their ability to navigate cold weather routes while minimizing casualties, developing reputations for
keeping their crews alive through Atlantic crossings that destroyed other ships, and earning loyalty from men. Who knew that sailing under such commanders significantly improved their chances of surviving to enjoy whatever treasures they captured? As we look back across centuries at these masters of cold weather survival, we see different kind of heroism than sword-fighting bravery that dominates pirate legends. We see quiet courage
of men who were willing to embrace any technique, no matter how disgusting or undignified.
It meant keeping themselves and their shipmates alive through conditions that would kill modern travelers. Despite all our advanced technology and specialized equipment, pirates learned that survival in face of nature's cruelty
required them to be resourceful, flexible, and willing to abandon their pride in favor of practical tool
solutions that worked, even when those solutions involved sleeping in piles like animals, covering themselves in grease like primitive tribesmen, or sharing body heat with unwashed strangers who might normally be enemies.